political correspondent for Politics 365, Jason Johnson, who's also a professor of political science at Hiram University. Jason, welcome back inside the War Room.
Glad to be here.
So what do we expect to come out of this dinner, especially since the president is heading to Capitol Hill tomorrow to meet with Senate Republicans anyway?
Well, I think this is sort of the inside meeting. This is the sort of rehearsal dinner before the real wedding. He's hoping to talk to these senators so that they can find some kind of common ground. What's interesting is, members of the Senate, whether Republicans or Democrats, they can think long term. They're in office for 6 years. They recognize the damage that is being done not only to this country but to the Republican brand. And he thinks if he can talk to these guys first, some of these men and women will go out, call their friends, and tomorrow he'll be able to make some progress so that people won't be suffering by the middle of the month.
Do you think this charm offensive works? I mean, Mitch McConnell, notably is not at dinner at the Jefferson Hotel tonight. Do you think it's easier for him to speak with either former colleagues or senators when McConnell's not there?
Well, it's not quite that simple. And I always find it interesting when they talk about the charm offensive, and it sort of sounds like the Senate version of Mean Girls. I mean, if you really think about it, Barack Obama has no choice. He has to go and talk to the Republicans because our government has ground to a halt. But this is not new. You can't make friends with people who don't want to be friends with you. And the Republican Party has lurched just hugely to the right ever since 2010. The mixture between racist Republicans who hate having a black president, hardcore conservatives who don't like having a Democratic president, and then those Republicans who are unhappy that they lost the 2012 election. He's dealing with people who don't want to negotiate it. So it doesn't matter how charming he is, but he can't appeal to the practicality of getting our government working.
It would literally be charming snakes. An ABC Washington Post poll out today found in an almost 2-to-1 margin Americans support cutting the overall budget. And the same number of Americans oppose across-the-board military spending. So regardless of party affiliation, that's what these people are saying. Doesn't this just show why the sequester became such a political issue?
Well, it shows why it became a political issue, but also it's because all too often, those of us in the pundit class promoted sort of a false equivalency. We suggested a pox on both houses. Oh, I'm mad at the Democrats and I'm mad at the Republicans. And really, this is primarily a Republican issue. I blame Barack Obama for agreeing to the sequester, which was a dumb idea anyway. He always got left naked at the poker table by John Boehner. The president is a terrible negotiator. But ultimately, this really has to do with the fact that the Republican Party doesn't want a balanced approach. As you can see from the poll, the public wants a balanced approach. They want things to be cut, they want money to be saved, but they don't want a meat cleaver. And so this is a political issue, partially because of Obama's weak negotiation, Republicans' refusal to negotiate, and the public wanting some common sense solutions.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, as somebody who set out to be a real negotiator has been largely ineffective as a negotiator. And, as a compromiser, I mean, he wanted to compromise. He couldn't get other people to compromise with him. So that's a really interesting way of looking at this whole issue of sequester. But I want to switch subjects now to a subject that we cover here regularly, Jason, which is civil rights. Your website has been reporting on the murder of Clarksdale, Mississippi mayoral candidate Marco McMillan. He was the first openly gay candidate to ever run for office in Mississippi, but the police are saying it's not a hate crime. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, this is a huge problem. He was killed. They actually have just caught the man responsible, an African-American man named Lawrence. He was murdered. He was burned. He was dragged. This is a barbaric crime. And what I think is always important for people to understand is that hate crime legislation, it's not sandbagging. It's not saying we just want to make sure somebody's in trouble. It is a way of saying when a crime is committed for symbolic purposes, that is something else that as a society we have to stand up against. So it's one thing to say, I hate Jewish people. But when you attack a synagogue, you're saying, I am attacking Jews in general. And this attack on this mayoral candidate in Clarksdale, it's an attack against all gay people. And that's something that this country shouldn't stand for.
What do you think of the idea that that hate crime legislation and the Voting Rights Act, and you're looking at all these civil rights issues right now. We're having a conversation about them again, but the conversation is that they're going in the other direction, that the Voting Rights Act looks like it's endangered, Section 5 is, that hate crimes legislation, which seems like it was put in place just for this type of a case, is being thrown out here. What do you make of that?
Well, it's massive resistance, and that's a historical term. There is a massive resistance on the part of a very loud but very dedicated conservative generally racist and homophobic minority in this country to ignore the demographic, cultural, and political changes that have to occur for this country to continue to function. It doesn't matter if you agree with homosexuality, if you think it is a choice, if you think it is biological. The fact of the matter is nobody in America should be killed because of who they want to have sex with. No better than it was not reasonable for men or women to be killed because of who they wanted to marry 60 years ago, or whatever issue happens to be important to America down the road. And that's really what we're fighting about here. This is not just about the life of one man cut down in his prime at 34 years of age. This is about, is America going to stand up for this case, for what happened with Megan Williams in 2007 in West Virginia, the young woman who was mentally retarded, was kidnapped for 7 days, these murders in Joliet, Illinois. There have been a massive increase in these kinds of crimes, and we as a country need to stand up against them.
All right, Jason Johnson, professor of political science at Hiram University, thanks for being here in the War Room. Cenk Uygur, though, is a professor of